everybody. I'm DG House. I'm an enrolled member of the Cherokee tribe of Northeast Alabama. That is a mouthful, isn't it? What does it mean to be enrolled? Well, what's amazing is most of you are enrolled in something. You might not know it, but if you're attending school, you're enrolled in the school. If you're a Boy Scout or a Girl Scout, you're enrolled in that program. What it means is to be a member of. In our country, in order to say you're Native American, advertise that you're Native American, have a Native American art show, you have to be enrolled. So when you are enrolled, you are actually given something that looks like a driver's license, and it has your number on it. There is at least one tribe that it's a sheet of paper. Almost everybody else, it's an actual like driver's license. It'll have your, sometimes it has your blood quantum. We'll talk about what that is. It'll have your number. I'm 3802 AD as far as the federal government is concerned. Might have your picture. It'll have your official stamp, your official seal, and you need to carry that with you. If you're doing an all Native American art show that has been advertised as that, people from the federal government are allowed to go to that art show and ask to see your credentials. So you tend to keep it on you. I keep it with me. I just keep it with me like a driver's license all the time, just so I know I don't have to remember to carry it around with me. Blood quantum means how much you are of something. Are you 25% Irish? Are you 100% Irish? Here's the thing, and I want you to think about this. How do you feel about this? In this country, the only things that have to prove blood quantum are racehorses, show dogs, and Native Americans. No other race in this country has to prove how much blood they have. On top of that, every single tribe or nation is sovereign. Sovereign meaning they can make up their own rules. So each tribe gets to decide how much blood quantum you need to have to be in that tribe. And you can imagine how troubling that can be under some circumstances if they take that blood quantum and they're moving it. People are in, people are out. And so then we get to the problem of self-identity. If you have identified as a Native American and was raised that way your whole life, and suddenly a blood quantum change of a couple points and you're out, how do you live the rest of your life? It's very arbitrary, isn't it? The idea being was to protect Native Americans. So other people can't say they are whatever and dilute something. But I can't give you the answers to that, but it's really something good for you to think about. How do you feel about that question? I can tell you that they're dead serious about this. There was a man in Missouri, and I felt bad for him because he said, you know, his tribe, and he was an artist, and I was thinking, you know, with all these DNA tests, people are getting back. You know, if it says you're 25% Native American, I thought, well, maybe he got a test like that. So that's why he was saying he's Native American. And I felt so bad for him until I found out that he made up a tribe, made up a tribal seal, and made up his own tribal ID card. And the federal government didn't take lightly to that. And off he went to jail. But that's another question we have to ask ourselves as we're doing this DNA test. Is a DNA test more important than having been raised your whole life as a Native American? So knowing that, let's talk about the fact that before Europeans came to what is the United States, it was well over 500 different tribes, 500 different languages, different culture, different food. I mean, it's really common sense if you think about it. If you're in a tribe that is now Alaska, are you dressing like a tribe that is from Florida? Of course not. If you are living on the Pacific coast, you're Salish or whatever, Are you eating the same food that somebody who's living in Indiana is? No. You can already sense the difference in culture. There are songs. There are what we call art, which were everyday objects with symbols on them to most native tribes. There are people that knew how to cook and cook well. You know, maple syrup, that's native. Popcorn is native. I mean, we could go on and on. The first car seat without cars is native. That's called a cradle board. And then the entire idea of the government of the United States came from Native American tribal government. So a full life was going on here. We take that to the Christopher Columbus era in 1492, where he was actually in the islands. He was not on the mainland of America ever. When we start getting people coming into the mainland, you know, it's the explorers, it's a Ponce de Leon in Florida. Some argue that the first explorer actually came through Alabama, which is where my people are from. As I get into these stories, I have got for you a combination of oral tradition, storytelling from the original people that experienced these things, and historians. And one of the interesting facts, what I'm about to tell you, the story I'm about to tell you, the Arikara people have a different bent on the story I'm about to tell you. I'm telling you more of the Lakota Sioux side of the story we're about to tell. So as we go through this and you get interested in something I say, you make sure you start doing your research. You know, dig as deep as you can into the archives, into the deep recesses of the interwebs. Don't believe anything you read there, right? Go to historians and take books out of the library. And if you can, talk to the actual people, the descendants of the people. So we're going to pick up the story when Europeans start coming to what is the United States. Most of these people, they're coming for really three reasons for the bulk of this time. They're either really, really poor. They're an indentured servant. What does that mean? You're going to live your whole life on a piece of land, working for the person that owns it, and your children will never have a piece of that. That life will just go on and on. You might be coming in the 1800s from the potato famine in Ireland. They're literally starving to death. At that time in London, say you're in London and you're a widow, you don't have your husband anymore. There are no benefits. There's no home to go to. An orphanage is just a workhouse where they're working children in jobs. If you can get enough money to get a ticket on one of those ships going to this new world that is, it's milk and honey and endless land, and you're finally going to get a chance at something, you might get on that wooden boat for 66 days and go across the Atlantic. I mean, imagine what these people did, the nerve they had to have. You also have rich people who see this as an opportunity to make more money. And then you have the people that are forced here. You have the people from Africa that are brought here as slaves. And who's already here? The indigenous people, the Native Americans. So I'm setting up the story for you. All these kind of things are going on at one time. Now I'm going to speak to you in general terms about Native culture. One of the things is we all had territories. Did we fight? Yes. Were there sometimes battles or whatever? Yes. But in general, we each had kind of marked out territories. Sometimes they would intermingle, you know, but mostly separate territories. Well, what I don't think we understood as a people is that when somebody moved into our territory and built a structure, that they were going to stay, that they thought they owned the land, because there really wasn't there was a concept of territory, but not a concept of ownership. You can't own a tree. You can't own a creek. You especially can't own a piece of a creek. What is the sense of that? Put your mind around that. If you owned 50 feet of a creek, what good is that going to do you? Right? And we certainly didn't understand things in squares, an acre. Then you have a piece of a tree. Over here, do you own the sky too? That it all comes from your state of mind and how you perceive the world. So that didn't make any sense to us. The next thing was the idea of warfare. Did natives kill natives? Of course they did, but not in the way and in the numbers that war was raged in, let's just say, Europe. Most times in Native American culture, war is about humiliation, and that was enough. That's what counting coup is about. If you've ever heard that, basically what it is a stick. And let's say horses have been introduced at this point, and you're a Plains Indian warrior, and you're riding, and the nerve it takes to get that close to the enemy and tap them with a stick, you win. They're humiliated. War is over. When we're talking about Europeans, we're talking about guns, and we're talking about killing people. And it's also a different kind of warfare of how they marched, all kinds of things. So there's no internet, there's no newspapers, there's no written language in any Native American tribe at this time. The Cherokee, eventually, my people do come up with an alphabet. But all the stories and the information, art and your voice and your song, how long would that take to go across the entire United States, this kind of information, right? And the third difference is this thing called manifest destiny. That also sounds like a big expression, doesn't it? Basically what it is the European ideal that they were born to take over this country. They have dominion over the people and the wildlife that were already here. And that was a feeling, and it was a way of thought for them. So they were on a mission to go right across the country. But once again, who was already here? Right, the Native Americans. So now you can feel the beginning of the conflict, right? And the farther east you are as a tribe, the first interactions that you're having with these new people. And of course, my tribe is one of those tribes that had really early contact. Our tribal area was so big. It was south of the Ohio River, all the way down, of course, to Georgia. Of course, other tribes are intermingled, right, into that. By the time we get to the 1830s, we basically shrink down to about here. We're one of the so-called civilized tribes, according to the predominant culture. What that meant is out of a desperation to save ourselves, we started to dress in European style clothing, tried to learn the language, tried to get jobs that made their money, European money. And it didn't work out for us. I hate to smile at that point, but boy, didn't it work out. So when we get to about the 1830s, the first of this happens. There's a president called Andrew Jackson, and he does not have a good reputation in Indian country. He's an interesting man, though. He's the son of immigrants that came with two boys, but his dad died like right after he was born. So he never knew his dad. He gets to be only about 13, and his older brother and himself joined the army. And he's eventually will become known as the Great Indian Killer. Now, around 13, 14, he comes down with the smallpox, and so does his brother. Hardly anyone survives that. His mother walks to where they were at on the base, gets both boys, takes them home, and the older brother dies of smallpox. Very soon after that, the mother becomes sick with cholera. She dies, and now here he is at 14 as an orphan. Back into the army, is now known as the Great Indian Killer, eventually runs for president, and he does become president. What you got to understand here is, to his people, he was a hero. He was doing everything that he thought was the right way to live. At the same time, we thought him as like a terrorist. And this is one of the things you're going to learn in life, and especially about history, that you can be the exact same person, do the exact same things, be a hero to this group, and a monster to another group. So here's what he signs. He and Congress signed the Indian Removal Act in 1830. And what that meant is tribes east of the Mississippi are now going to be put in lands west of the Mississippi. So here we are years later, 6, 7 years later, and Buchanan is president. And Buchanan signs the bill to remove all the Cherokee people. Now, my family's from Bozeman, Alabama, which is right in the middle of Cherokee territory. They came for us. They came for us anytime, night or day. There are stories of people rushing to their neighbor because they heard commotion to find that dinner was still cooking on the stove, but those people were never seen again. You went, look at what you're wearing right now. That's what you were in for the next few months. Grandma, babies, sick, it didn't matter. Everybody up and out. A lot of us were held in cattle pens, and that could be 30 days to 90 days in those pens. Imagine the disease and the filth in that. Then we were forcibly marched across the country from about Alabama to Oklahoma. There were 5 or 6 different routes. And this is what's interesting, especially for adults that are watching this. These were all contract people. The government contracted them to march us across. So they gave them the money up front. So how much food do you think they actually bought to keep the people healthy, right? Also, it never stopped. If somebody had to give birth or somebody was on death's door, everyone had to keep marching and leave them behind. Now, at this point, I'm sure this story is making you very sad. So I'm going to tell you some positive things. There was a soldier who fell in love with one of the women who were being marched. When they got to Oklahoma, they were in love. He got her a horse. They rode all the way back. Since Indians couldn't own land, he bought her family's land back for them. And I have met their descendants since then. And the other thing I want you to know is as we were being at this death march across all these states, there were settlers that figured out what was happening. So on their farm, if they saw somebody left behind, they'd go down and get them, bring them back to the house and nurse them back to health. And that person or people will become part of their family. So I say to you, as we tell hard stories to listen to, make sure you look for the hero in the story, because somewhere in there will be somebody that did the right thing. All right? Shall we bring this story up a little northern? There was an Indian Removal Act and the removal of Indians right next to you in Illinois. It happened there too. Now we're going to come out to where I live. I live in Bozeman, Montana. So what we're going to start talking about now are the Lakota Sioux and the Cheyenne people. In 1868, there's something signed called, and get a map out if you can at this point. In 1868, the second Laramie Treaty is signed. And what that does, the government says to Lakota Sioux and the Northern Cheyenne that you can have, it's basically the western part of what is now South Dakota. You can hunt, and this is all yours. But we really don't want you going into the Montana and Wyoming territories. If you go, hunt a little, come back, you stay in this square. Is this going to work out? No, it's not going to work out. Not only are we going into a depression at this time, an economic depression. People are losing money. And imagine if you came here because you were poor and now we're going into a depression. More importantly than that, some miner found, well, let me tell you how the natives put it. The yellow metal that makes white men crazy. Did you figure it out? Gold. Found gold in the sacred Black Hills, and you'll know it today as Black Hills Gold. Well, once that word got out, the government heard, and they send this guy named Armstrong Custer. And some of you might be shaking your heads, at this point. Some of you won't know who this is. He's a fascinating, I'll say that, character. He graduated from West Point 1861, dead last in his class. But he had some kind of bizarre nerve. He had this nerve and this, I don't even know if it's arrogance or whatever it was. He would even ride sometimes with his hands off the horse and his arms up. And he always went first in battle, which, the soldiers, of course, are going to love that he's leading them in. But the thing is, he also was a person that didn't need any sleep. So imagine if you're on horseback with him, because he's in the cavalry, that's soldiers on horseback. He sleeps 4 or 5 hours a night. These boys must have been exhausted, right? All the time. Well, they send Armstrong and his men out to see if it's true, and it is true. And he reports back that it's true. Guess what happens to that treaty? Government is not going to deal with it. Tell them nothing. Well, the natives start realizing that people are coming, and they're not coming in hundreds. They're coming like at 50,000 people at a time into what is supposed to be their land. So they figure, and rightly so, well, I guess we don't have a treaty anymore. So they start going into the Montana and Wyoming territory to hunt the buffalo. The buffalo is the most important animal to the Plains Indian. There's only one thing you need beside a buffalo to survive on your own, and that's water. A buffalo and water, and you have everything you need. That's how important a buffalo is, all right? So they're going to go start doing that. Well, now we have what the government calls is the Indian problem or the Indian Wars. Now we got to start grabbing these people and forcing them on to land set aside, and usually not the best land, set aside to make something called reservations. Reservations today are nothing like the time I'm talking about. We're in about the 1860s now, all right? Back then, reservations were like concentration camps. They were like jail. When they put you into that facility, government facility, you couldn't leave. You ate what they gave you, you wore what they gave you, and you didn't leave, okay? So now we have the army coming. And then what about the people? What about the indigenous people? The people there are nomads. They move. It is such a great concept. Think of the Great Plains and the grasses and the buffalo. As the buffalo moved, so did the people. And as they ate the grass, the people moved with them. So that by the time you came all the way back around, everything had regrown. Nothing was being destroyed. Now suddenly we have settlers and fences. Buffalo can't roam, neither can people with fences. So the army's coming, and terrible things start to happen. Massacres all over it. Right now I'm just talking about where I'm at, Wyoming, Montana. Terrible things, terrible strategies, where Custer would sometimes wait until about 4 a.m. and then shoot the entire village down, knowing everyone would be asleep. Another thing he would do, gentlemen, and you'll be able to sympathize with this, he would wait for the men to leave to go hunt, and then he'd shoot who was left in the village, and that would be women, children, elderly, and the disabled. So, gentlemen, if you are not that far away and you hear all that gunfire, what are you going to do? You're going to come running back as fast as you can, and then he had you all in one group. I want you to know that strategy because of the story that's going to happen now. So the battles are on. The Indian Wars are on. They're coming to get the people, specifically in this story, the Lakota Sioux and the Northern Cheyenne, who are moving into Montana, Wyoming. to try to escape. You've got natives at this point who have been put on reservations and escaped. You have natives that haven't even heard about all this yet. And you have the natives that are running for their lives. In this circle of human beings, you have people who might be the only one left in their family. It might just be a grandma and a baby. It might just be a husband whose wife and children are gone. So I want you to feel what they felt at this point. I'm going to guess, you can start yelling out what you think they felt. Scared, mad, frustrated, all of that's going on. There's this battle in a place called Rosebud in Wyoming. And it was a bit of a rout for the army. The natives kind of got them. And so they knew that they were going to be in trouble, the natives. But they heard of a place. They heard of a place that had a huge herd of antelope, pronghorn antelope. They thought, well, we can all eat, we can all settle down, we can all regroup, we can think about what we're going to do next. So they're all headed in that direction. We know that area today is the Little Bighorn River in what is now Montana. The natives, we call that the Greasy grass. So they're heading there. The Army already has this in their mind. They know where they're going. Let's talk about areas of history that aren't black and white, all the gray in between, right? Custer had Native American scouts. They were in the Army. And they, of course, had contacts, and they knew where the other natives were going. That's how the Army then, of course, found out. So we have our old friend, General Custers Armstrong. He's coming from the east. Crook, General Crook, is supposed to be coming up straight, but he's the guy that got caught at Rosebud and got defeated. So that's where it first starts going wrong there. Where I live right here in Bozeman, Montana, General Gibbon is headed east to west. And the fort is still here. If you ever come visit us, you can see the fort they left from. Here's their orders. Do not start anything until all the generals are there. Custer's coming with about 700 men. Now let's talk about those men. They're 15 to 50 years old. Most of them are immigrants. Because think, if you come here poor, you have no money to get started. If you join the Army, you have a place to live, you have clothes, and you get fed. And after a certain amount of time, you get discharged, and perhaps you saved enough to start, right? So almost everybody's an immigrant. Very, very few of these men had ever been this far west. The vast majority had never even seen a Native American before. And almost none of them had shot a gun in a war situation. One more thing. Custer, because he wanted to get there first, he wanted the credit, he wanted to win this battle, not with the other generals. He wanted to do all this. He made those soldiers leave their hand-to-hand combat weapons back at the fort. You need to know that. Remember how he never sleeps? These guys are right. If you've ever ridden a horse, imagine riding that horse 10 hours a day. And it's now June in what is south of Billings, Montana. And anyone who lives in Montana will be laughing right now because June in Billings is sweltering. So you're on a horse, you're on horseback, it's 100 degrees. Let's add to the mix for these men. We find out later that most of them had toothaches and almost everybody had dysentery because of what they were feeding them. And for you that don't know what that is, it's a nice way of saying diarrhea and nausea. And it's hot, and you're riding a horse, and you're terrified, and here they come. Now, who's in that village? Remember, you might be the only one in your family. You're camped there along the Little Bighorn River. It's kind of in a ravine, a gully. You're camped there. About 10 miles out, they get a sense of where it's at, the scouts do. About 5 miles out, you notice Custer's not waiting for anybody. About 5 miles out, one of the scouts says, there are more campfires down there than I've seen combined in my lifetime. And Custer says, that's about 700 to 800 warriors, and that's the dust from their horses. When they get to be about a mile out, the scouts take off their army uniforms and put on their best regalia, their best clothes. You know why? Because they thought they were going to meet the Creator. And you want to dress your best when you meet God. That should have been a sign to somebody at that point. Now, story has it, through the people that were there, that at this point, 2 teenage boys, native boys, run right into the army, not on purpose. They're terrified. They run off. And Custer at this moment says, the jig is up. We have to go to battle right now. So, and there's so much more for you to read on this. We are so just skimming. So when you find the interesting parts for yourself, go deeper and dig deeper. See what the natives say. See what the historians say at this point. All right. So Major Reno is part of this corps of 700 people, and he goes down to the first, the part of the village that they encounter first. He goes down over the river and in, and what do? They start shooting. Now, there's a very famous, powerful chief at that end of the village. His name was Gall, and 2 of his family members are immediately killed. Oh, the chaos. They're yelling retreat. The soldiers are trying to get back up the hill. There's water. There's a river. There's horses. There's chaos. I'm so glad I wasn't there. And up they go because Custer's waiting for them. The only thing is, when they get up there, guess who isn't there? Custer's not there. So now they're left on top of the hill. Where's Custer? He's behind the hill. So he's back here. Here's the hill, and the village is down here. So the village can't see him, and he can't see them. Because remember what he likes to do? He likes to run warriors and then catch them. So he's thinking Reno's going to run these 700 warriors, and he'll be at the end of the village to get them. He thought they were all going to run. Nobody was going to fight. They finally get down there, and this is a small area you can visit anytime. The Bighorn Monument, Bighorn Battlefield. He gets down the end of the hill. We're now on June 25th, 1876. It's about 110 degrees. And we've got this, boys. They come over the hill. When they come over the hill, according to historians, it was anywhere from 8,000 to 15,000 Native Americans are in this village. And at least 2,000 of them are warriors. Custer's with 231 men when they come over the hill. Not only that, the differences in warfare that we talked about. They have rules in the army, in the cavalry. 4 stay together. You never let go of your horse. You station yourself out. Well, here come the natives up that hill, one at a time. Behind bushes, behind whatever. They're coming up one by one. And these guys are standing in groups of 4 with horses. Well, the chaos. You can't imagine the chaos. There was a gentleman I knew. This is actually Crow land that this all happened on. The Native American tribe, the Crow people. And he was an elder in the tribe. And before he passed, he told me this battle took about as long as it took a hungry man to eat his dinner. Historians say that it was definitely about 45 minutes or less from the time that Reno went down to Custer coming over the hill. At this point, Custer and all his men were gone. They were all killed. Also, about 60 Native Americans were killed. This is a sad story, but there's a big point to this story. The natives, this is their one big victory. But they knew they were going to pay for this. So that entire village was packed up and gone within 3 days. At that same time, one of the generals finally made it there, and that's what he found. All those soldiers, Custer, were all buried in place in the 100-degree days right on the battlefield. But that's not the story that went in the history books. So I'm going to back up now and give you a tiny look at the history of Native American art. The history of Native American art is the history of storytelling. It's always a narrative. We might even start with pictographs, petroglyphs, are these things you've seen before, maybe on caves, maybe on rock walls. Well, let me tell you, this is also a human thing, not just a Native American thing. There's some in France that are 70,000 years old. Remember what the most important animal is to the Plains Indian? Buffalo. This is what a buffalo hide, buffalo skin looks like. Not only did it provide you everything, housing, clothing, food, everything, it was also something you could do your stories on. This is a winter count. It would go from December to December. These symbols, we would all know what they meant so we could read our own history. You might also be doing those stories on cloth. But now we're at the era of reservations, aren't we? And do you remember? You can't leave. If you can't leave, you can't hunt. How are you going to tell the stories? This is how it happened. This is a government agency. So they had a lot of paper around, especially something called ledger paper. It's accounting paper. How many horses came in? How much flour came in? Whatever went out. That's where the accountant was keeping track of all that. You could get your hands on that, or out of the waste paper basket, you might find, scrap paper, receipts, old, old books, whatever you could find. And at that time, soldiers were issued watercolors, crayons, or colored pencils. So you can get your hands on that. That's the beginning of something we call reservation era art or ledger art. There were at least 5 different ledger artists at the Battle of Little Bighorn, the Battle of Greasy Grass, and they drew their narrative art to show what happened. Here's a copy of one of those original drawings. How many arrows, who went down, all of that. But those stories never went into your history books. It wasn't until 1980 that a wildfire came through and burnt the whole battlefield, all those grasses down to the bottom. Guess what was down there? Animals, people, casings, guns. And those smart scientists came in with their flags. And when they got done, after 2 years of studying it, this was the story. This is the importance of telling your own story. We already knew what happened, but that didn't go into the narrative of the story of the United States until very recently. Ledger art lived on in the era that comes next in boarding schools, and that's a whole different subject. There's a drawing on, does that notebook paper look familiar to you? It should. School notebook paper. We have a 15-year-old in love with a 15-year-old girl, and if you notice, she's as big as big as he is on a horse. The storytelling. She's as big as the horse because he's telling you how important she is to him, right? Narrative art. So if something really important happened 500 feet back here, and it also happened to me, we would bring that story straight up and it'd be on the same plane. Now, when you're taking art lessons now, you're talking about shading and making things look 3-dimensional. This art has nothing to do with that. This has to do with telling the story. Speaking of the story, look at this piece of ledger art. Is ledger art being made today? Yes. There are many famous ledger artists working today. Here is one of those Lakota Sioux people living today, eating, I'm gonna guess, lunch with General Custer. And here's what the funny part is, if you know the culture. The government continues to give something called commodities, food, to certain Native American individuals. We get this thing called commodity cheese. It is the most delicious thing in the world, and it must be horrible. It's even worse than Velveeta cheese, and it even tastes better than Velveeta cheese. So he's serving Custer some commodity cheese, right? That makes sense. Here we're talking about culture. This is George Flett. He was one of our beloved ledger artists. He's Spokane Indian, and I just loved him. Every time I saw him was just a complete delight. And he's been gone a couple years. I see a couple, it's probably been more like 4 or 5. What this symbolizes? Wedding. When you see couples under a blanket, especially with an umbrella, for his culture, this would be weddings taking place. And the last thing I want you to see, does everything have to be dead serious? It doesn't. Ledger art started as all males, all wore. Now women, children make ledger art, and it can represent your culture and be hilarious at the same time. Here you go. Look at that, Indians going to the pool. I always make a joke about Speedos at this point. Don't wear them unless you are an Olympic athlete. That's always my advice. So you don't have to be dead serious. You could be sarcastic as long as you're thoughtful, right? So here's our lesson today. Today, you take notebook paper or ledger paper that you can still buy at a place like Staples, color pencils or crayons, and you're going to make your own ledger art. This story is about you. Not every day is about you. Today is about you. You're going to tell a narrative story. It doesn't have to be a huge story. It could be, here's one example. I had a student in 5th grade whose sister opened the pantry and a can of beans hit her before they went to school. Well, he thought that was hilarious, so that was his story. It can be that simple. It could be the time you went camping. It can be your favorite sport or video game, as long as it tells a story and there's no words on it except for your name when you're done with this. So take this opportunity to think about the story that you want to present to the world, and wait until you see an entire classroom full of stories. And then you try to figure out what the person is saying. And thank you very much. I really enjoyed our time together. I'll see you again someday. Bye-bye.